Hi, Ann.
Hi, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm doing just fine. How are you?
Have you forgiven me for getting the time on this wrong?
Well, I was starting to get really nervous. You know, my nervousness, it's something like an adrenaline rush. So I know when something's going to start, like my class is going to start, and something changes inside the body. Well, then if it doesn't start at the right time, you know, you can go into overload, and it gets a little nerve-wracking.
And knowing
so
that you were going to talk...
now, Bob. You better be careful.
I'm sorry. It's all my fault.
No, you're going to take the brunt of it, because as I say, I'm all keyed up. I have excess adrenaline now. You know,
oh, so you're going to be even more intense than usual?
I'm usually really relaxed. I'm a very mellow blogging head, sir, as you know.
Oh, are you really?
Unless something
That's what you're most famous for, would you say?
Well, something has to set me off. You know, it's that fight or flight. You know, you can get an adrenaline rush from all manner of things. I'm just saying that starting 15 minutes late gave me this, like, just amorphous, generic adrenaline flow. It's not about any subject. It's just a physical phenomenon. Like,
so we're going to have some great television. So anything could happen. I mean, you could just go off at any moment.
I know that's what you want.
You want to do that now?
I know you're trying to push my buttons.
that was all part of the plan. It was intentional that I was 22, 25 minutes late. So, you want to talk about Trayvon or what? We want to talk about a lot of things.
As I said in our pre-conversation, I think it's all connected.
You think everything is connected?
I'm a connected.
You mean everything we're going to talk about is connected? Because we had said we might talk about health care, the Supreme Court case,
once I have a
Trayvon Martin case.
Once I have a list of topics, which we start with, I start to see themes. You know, I think of ways and I can harmonize them and connect them up. It's part of something that works for me in blogging, which is I start with one thing, I can weave something else in, and I enjoy the process of kind of aggregating and connecting and finding similarities.
You're a connector.
Themes. Yes, I'm a connector.
You are a lumper, not a splitter.
Yes. And what does that mean? Is that a big psychological concept?
Lumpers and splitters? In some disciplines, like, for example, Emily, I once wrote a piece for The Atlantic long ago, in the era of magazines, about historical linguistics, and there were always these disputes about whether two given languages were part of the same language family at the next higher level or not, you know. And there were lumpers and there were splitters. There were people who saw the commonalities and said, yes, I think these languages, you know, have a common descent point right here. And then there were splitters who noticed the differences. You're saying you are a lumper. You're a connector.
In fact, just as you said that, I felt like saying lumpers and splitters were really basically the same. That was my response.
That's how much of a lumper you are. That's crazy. That's crazy lumping.
I'm very lumpy.
That's like out of control lumping, Ann. I'm worried.
Yeah, watch out. There are lumps.
They're the opposite.
Speed lumps. There are no
lumps
in the road.
How are you going to lump these things we're talking about today?
Well, should I reveal my secret overarching theme?
Why not?
My secret overarching theme is that people speaking in politics, particularly liberals, tend to use emotion and pressure to influence others. They try to get an emotional theme going and create a feeling of peer pressure to get people to feel that they must be in a certain position in order to be right-thinking and good and accepted by their group.
You think liberals do that more than conservatives?
That they are. No, I think I encounter it myself, but I think there are people, lots of people do it, so I don't think it's just liberals. But what I encounter is a disinclination among liberals to actually get into the evidence and get into the specific arguments. For example, with the Obamacare oral argument, I think that there was a huge attempt, a media blitz, which was really about trying to make people feel that the Affordable Care Act must be upheld, and that if the Supreme Court doesn't go along with that it's doing something terrible and it's become extremist and so forth. And everyone knows that, you know, in a sort of a way that doesn't really get into the actual legal arguments. And I think that's why the Solicitor General ran into so much trouble in the court, was that he wasn't really willing or prepared to go into the conservative arguments. And it's really been a kind of conventional wisdom among elite lawyers for a long time that you don't really need to engage with these arguments, that's something those other people over there talk about. But we can hold the center, we can hold the dominant discourse, which is all about how courts have to defer to Congress and things of that sort. And so when it actually becomes necessary to answer those arguments, they're not really prepared to do that, and they try to create some kind of an emotional fog away from that. Yes.
Wait, this has been a view of elite lawyers, you said, in general? Just high-level lawyers think you don't have to engage?
I would say in legal academia and among many people in media who write about the Supreme Court, for example, Adam Liptak at the New York Times. Various people have these posts that do a lot of the opinion shaping. I mean, if you look at what the New York Times has been doing with respect to this case, it's very much about shaping people's like an emotional sense that this must be upheld and that the court is terrible and extreme if it doesn't uphold it.
So
that's
you see
not
this
a legal
as a plot.
argument.
You see this is a liberal plot. This is a
No, it's not
conspiracy.
a plot, but it's a flaw because if it ever happens that you actually do need to engage with those arguments, you're going to be hemming and hawing and coughing and taking drinks of ice water the way the poor Solicitor General was doing at the beginning of the argument. You suddenly realize that you're disarmed because you don't have the actual arguments on the merits.
It sounds like he was pathetically underprepared. I mean, it sounds like...
He was prepared, but he was prepared to make the kinds of arguments that elite liberal academics and high-level lawyers and legal thinkers within journalism or legal journalists have been doing, like Linda Greenhouse at the New York Times all these years, that they've been doing for so long. They're so used to doing it. They're so used to dominating by doing that I think they're actually disarmed when that's not what's working. And I want to say similar things about some of the other things that we're going to talk about, like the Trayvon Martin situation, and wanting to get a topic out there that people can get emotional about. I mean, really, the dominant subject in the presidential election right now ought to be economics, the economy. But when that's not working, gas prices are up and this and that, there's such an urge to get something out there that people can get all jazzed up about, like the dead body of a teenager.
God, you are a conspiracy theorist. So you think like the Trayvon Martin thing, the interest in that was kind of trumped up in order to compensate for the fact that the economic issues aren't working or something?
I think it was seized upon and made into a symbol, not just a symbol, but a device to stir up emotions in an area that would be distracting and very involving for people so that they wouldn't, it's not about having an intellectual discourse about real ideas. It's about getting people to move into an emotional state, which is, I think, what really happens in a... Can I just say, I think that's what a totalitarian society tries to do to people's minds, as opposed to a democratic society in which people discourse and discuss real ideas and communicate with each other.
So it's not just a plot, it's a totalitarian
I think it's
plot.
Anti-democratic. I think it's an anti-democratic way to try to influence...
To talk about, to make a big deal of the Trayvon Martin case is anti-democratic?
I think that to use that subject, the way it was used, is an attempt to move the political discourse into a very highly emotive realm where people won't talk about ideas and won't talk about real evidence, but will have a lot of feeling. This poor boy died. He just had candy and iced tea. He was unarmed. He was innocent. And then the whole history of racism comes flowing in and gets all connected onto that poor boy's dead body. Now, something very strange is going on.
You're right that, I mean, look, people, you concede, I assume, that people on both sides of the political spectrum use emotion to try to convince people to do what they want done, right? Like the law, the stand your ground law, God knows if you went back and looked at the NRA campaign and the campaign by whoever supported that, you would see people pushing emotional buttons, right? Here in particular in that case, right? I mean, that's just part of life, right? Left and right, you agree?
I think that there are people on both sides who do it, yes. And I'm just trying to, and I think Blogging Heads was a project that was about doing this, to get people to actually talk about ideas and communicate and have the marketplace of ideas, which is the vision of a democratic society that we should have. So these things that are being used to pull people into the emotional realm and to divide them and have them not thinking, not dealing with ideas, I think that it should be a shared enterprise of intelligent, good people on both sides. The
Trayvon Martin case is drawing us into some actual discussion of ideas, like the merits of the stand your ground law.
Why choose? Why choose one individual case rather than to look at evidence in a broader way that's about where are the real problems? Why would you choose?
This is the way it always works.
Well, I mean, you know what it reminds me of on the right is the old Terry Schiavo case, where people got very excited about one person's very vivid, disturbing, emotional situation. And I thought that was an example of the right taking a particular case, because, you know, when you have it about one individual, people engage with it in a different way. You know, like they say, what's the famous, isn't it a Stalin quote, that one individual is a tragedy, a million is nothing. In other words, we're not looking at the larger picture of all the things that are happening to people and weighing the evidence. We just see one particular thing that happened, and it's so vivid that we can move people with it. Well, but why are we making a decision which way we want to move people? What are the real problems? What are the real ideas here?
But
we're fogging the mind with a a dead body. That's the way terrible things happen when we go down that road.
I mean, this is just the way I think it's always been. Most Americans are not very interested in things like the Stand Your Ground law or the question of whether a mandate to buy insurance is constitutional. And the only way they're going to get drawn into that is if a specific case comes along and draws their attention to it. So it is always the case that, or often the case, usually the case, that some individual case is the frame for discussing some issue. And
it might get us started, that's right.
When it's a case of criminal law, it's going to be an individual crime case. So and, look, it's not, I don't think you have to do any conspiracy theorizing to explain why this got people's attention. It's an intriguing case. Don't you find yourself naturally reading about it? It's kind of a mystery. It's kind of weird.
Right.
It's kind of, and I feel strongly that if this guy does not do any jail time whatsoever, then Florida needs to change its laws. It should not be the case that if you've got a gun, you have the right to pursue someone who turns out to be doing nothing wrong and initiate a confrontation, and then things get out of control and then you kill them.
Wait a minute.
I know. I don't want to live in that society where you can do that and get away with it.
I don't want to live in a democracy where we have the rule of law and where there is a such thing as due process, where people start to state as facts things that are not proven in evidence. I mean, I've read different
things we
versions.
actually know.
No,
he had the gun. The guy wasn't doing anything wrong. He pursued him. He initiated contact with him. And
Bob, I don't think those are proven facts. I mean, I don't want to argue the other side, but I know that we don't know that.
I don't mean he hit him first. I'm willing to entertain the possibility that Trayvon initiated contact in that sense. But I mean, it is inherently when at night you stalk somebody, you pursue them.
Bob, you're characterizing the facts. Why do you want to do that? What is the urge within you?
If some guy other than a cop is following me at night, and I feel so threatened, that I turn around and fight them, I think I'm entitled to do that. Because nobody but a cop has the legal authority to follow me like that at night, okay?
You're saying like that. You're characterizing the facts, and
that's on the 911 call. They say, "Are you following him?" And he says, "Yes." We know he followed him.
I think you're characterizing facts that we don't know. I was heartened to see that Rasmussen did a poll on the subject asking whether Zimmerman was guilty, and that a majority of Americans haven't made up their minds. They're not sure. They don't know, despite the media blitz.
Well, I'm not saying he's guilty of what most people are saying he's guilty of.
Hey, Bob, what do you think?
I'm not assuming that he kind of hunted him down and shot him without provocation.
What are you assuming?
I'm conceding, yes, there was probably an altercation.
Why are you even using the word concede? Why are you talking like that? It's just so emotive. It's so, you want to see him do some
it's emotive. I don't want to live in a society. I don't want to live in a society where people with guns can chase me, secure in the knowledge that if I turn around and go, "Wait a second, what the hell are you doing?" They can shoot me and then say, "Oh well, he resisted," and get away with it.
Bob,
okay?
You're getting so emotive about this. I don't know why you want to.
I want to apologize for that.
It's all right, but I mean, you're just being an example of what I'm talking about. Why is this firing you up? Why is it propelling you into a particular position where you where you feel so strongly that you're in your position that you said that you would concede something, as if You were a party.
And I always talk that way. Once I've announced that I'm on one side of an argument, that's the way I talk.
Does that make you a lumper or a splitter?
I'm actually both, I maintain, but I think you're changing the subject.
No, it's all connected, but no, I'm not taking a position either way. I'm just trying to understand what happened. And the main thing that I want to understand, that I really can see happening, is how an individual incident gets absorbed into the political discourse and becomes the most important thing that's happening in America. I mean, many people have died since in this period when Trayvon Martin died. There have been shootings, there have been killings, lots of things have happened. But this one thing was chosen to be symbolic of all sorts of things.
You think there was you think liberals met in a room and decided to make it the big issue?
No, you're so interested in painting me as a conspiracy theorist that you keep saying things
what do you mean by it was chosen?
Wrong.
What did you mean by it was chosen? You don't like me saying concedes. What do you mean by it was chosen?
Why did the national public discourse become turned on and lit up by one incident? It had to
because this is naturally the kind of case. There were some people very invested in it. There were some people very invested in it who were agitating to bring it to light.
They saw how they could use it. They saw how they could exploit the dead body of a teenager. Now,
that's not the way they thought of it.
That's what I feel nauseated about.
That's not the way they thought of it at all. No, I'll tell you something, Ann. One thing I feel sure of, I blog at The Atlantic now, and a good example of someone who was involved in bringing it to light was Ta-Nehisi Coates, whose name I sometimes hear pronounced Ta-Nehisi, but I don't see how you get that pronunciation out of the way it's spelled.
I think he says it differently from the way he spells it.
And settle the matter. Anyway, I have absolutely no doubt that he was very involved in helping to bring it to light, and I have no doubt that he wasn't sitting there thinking, oh, let's exploit this to do A, B, and C. He felt very strongly that he saw evidence and he's African American. I mean, he can relate to this, and that he saw evidence of something that was a wrong, and a wrong that he could relate to, and he wanted to right it.
Well,
I don't think he was being.
Yeah, but you have to keep control over what you do, because you don't want to race bait. You don't want to set a tinderbox on fire. You don't want to take people into a zone where they're not thinking and looking at what really happened, and then instead are emoting and overdoing it and becoming a lynch mob themselves. I mean, you don't want to become a vigilante in pursuit of the vigilante. At some point, people need to get a grip.
Well, if you mean a literal lynch mob, I'm sure we agree that Spike Lee disgraced himself.
Oh, only because he put out the wrong address.
No. Putting out the right address would have been equally disgraceful.
No, he didn't. Did he apologize for that?
I
he
don't
settled
know.
with the older couple.
But that is really reprehensible. That is really,
right,
like my opinion of him, which has been, reasonably high.
But Bob, listen to you. You were saying, this guy needs to spend some jail time. I don't want to. So, in other words, you're saying, I've already decided. That's what a lynch mob is.
I think there's enough that we know.
Is he entitled to due process? I thought you liberals.
Of course, Ann. I'm not saying skip the trial, for God's sake. I'm saying, given what we know for a fact.
You're trying to set up an unfair trial where someone is presumed guilty, where people are hot to get this person.
Okay, let me restate it, Ann. If you accept the facts of the case as I am inferring them from what we've seen are as follows. Man with gun, at night, pursues guy who had done nothing wrong. Upon encountering him, not surprisingly, antagonism arises, a fight ensues, he kills him with the gun. I'm saying, if you just accept those as the bare facts, I'm saying that I don't want to live in a society where the guy with the gun doesn't get any punishment at all. I'm not saying it's murder. Maybe it's manslaughter. Maybe it's something else. I'm saying I don't want to live in a society where that guy doesn't get arrested and prosecuted.
I don't see why the gun is so important.
And remember, he wasn't even arrested.
I think you're absorbing this. Well, he was, he's brought in handcuffs, but he wasn't charged.
Right.
At the point when he was in handcuffs, he was arrested, but he wasn't charged.
Okay, arrested. He wasn't charged.
I mean, do you think he was in,
I'm not sure. Was he don't you have to have a charge to it? Doesn't arrest always have a charge along with it?
Well, what constitutes an arrest? At what point do you say you're under arrest and you have to read the Miranda rights?
You're the law professor. You tell me, but I thought you were arrested for something. As opposed to being brought in for questioning.
You're arrested. They have to have probable cause to arrest you. or it's
You're saying this guy was arrested?
He was arrested. He was brought down to the police station in handcuffs. How could that not be an arrest? I mean...
Well, then what was he arrested for? What was the charge?
I don't know what he was arrested for, but he was not charged. There has to be a crime when you're arrested, right? You have to have probable cause.
Yeah, well, okay, anyway. Anyway,
see, so you said you've long opposed guns, and you would like a lot of more restrictions on guns.
I don't oppose guns. I don't oppose guns.
But, I mean, you're saying that...
I have a gun, Ann.
Good.
It was my father's. I didn't go out and buy it, but I have one.
I feel protected by all the people who have guns because I think it creates a sense that you shouldn't go out and mess with people. They might actually be able to defend themselves. I think that's very important for women, for small people, older people who have to be in their homes, have to walk down the street, and are at the mercy of any number of thugs. Can you look at a person and know, I could take her down. I could totally... beat her into submission. Because, look, I know I'm stronger than her. I think concealed weapons are helpful in that, in equal...
That's not even what I'm arguing about. That's not even what I'm arguing about.
Okay, but what I would like
I'm saying if you have a concealed weapon and you pursue someone who's done nothing wrong at night and wind up killing them, something has gone wrong and you should get at least some punishment. Because you should not pursue them like that.
I just don't think that that's fine-grained enough to be an actual hypothetical. But... in some sense, I know what you're trying to say, and you would be right, but I just think there could be details in that story. For example, if you were a witness in a trial and you sat down and told the story that far, and I was the lawyer for the defense, I would have some questions I would want to ask you to draw out some more details, you know? And if this was the Defenders TV show or something like that, you would start admitting some facts, and the jury... that might make it very clear that the jury should find that person not guilty. So I think there's more texture to this, there's more detail, and we should try to be intelligent and cool-headed about judging where the crimes are.
But see, part of the thing is, Ann, it's already fairly clear that the actual initiation of any fight between them. I mean, there seem to have been witnesses to the fight.
Fairly clear.
But the actual initiation of the fight, I think we're never going to have clear evidence of because we're only going to have one side of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I don't want to be possible is to let the guy with the gun claim something happened. The guy hit me, I had to kill him.
Right, and that
that's
person's
what I
dead,
don't want to permit.
All right, so, Bob, so then would you propose that the law be restated so that if the evidence were in equal balance, did he do it, didn't he do it, that he should be found guilty?
Yeah, I want the laws written in such a way.
No, I'm talking about the constitutional law, the idea of what you have a right to. When you go to a criminal trial, if the prosecution, can only prove that it's equally likely that you were guilty of the crime or not guilty of the crime, that the jury should convict.
No, I'm not saying that.
You can see why you wouldn't want to say that.
No, but you could write the law
that doesn't
in
even
such
work
a way.
In tort law. That wouldn't even be enough to prove a tort. That's not even preponderance of the evidence.
No, but here's my point.
In a criminal trial, the standard of proof that the prosecutor has to reach is beyond a reasonable doubt.
I get
Do you
that.
oppose that as a constitutional right? Because as a good liberal, if you want to say you oppose that, please nail that down. I'm on the big general principle.
I don't oppose it. And can I explain what I'm saying? I'm saying, okay, if it's necessary, to avoid what I'm saying needs to be avoided here, to have the law say that if you are armed and pursue someone, you are liable for any harm to them regardless of what happens in between the initiation of pursuit and
you would need to
blah, blah, blah.
But
then we would
already
have enough testimony to convict beyond a reasonable doubt, okay?
What you're talking about now is what are the elements of the crime and can something properly be criminalized? So that'd be similar to like the way you could say that you're guilty of murder if you're committing a felony and somebody gets murdered. You're guilty of first-degree murder based on your intent. So you go in to commit an armed robbery. you don't intend to kill anyone and then something happens and somebody gets killed, that's first-degree murder. That's what felony murder is. So but you have a statute that defines that as the crime, and then the prosecution has to prove that as being the crime. So maybe what you're saying is you want to define a particular crime and state the elements of that crime and get a statute passed that would say that. But if there's not currently a statute that says that, then that's not a crime.
What I said from the very beginning is, what the bare outlines of what happened are, to my mind, something that should not be legal, and if it's legal in Florida now, they should change the law. That's what I said at the beginning of this conversation.
But then you have to.
I'm not saying I know whether he's guilty under Florida law.
Okay, so then you have to think of other situations in which somebody would be guilty under that law, and you might regret it. So you have to think of not just that one case. What would be the law that would get this guy guilty based on what he did? I want to write a law that makes the elements of the crime exactly what he did. But then in the next case, you might say, "Oh no, well, what a mistake I made making that the crime."
So you want the limiting case?
What?
And I'm trying to give us the perfect segue to healthcare. I'm saying you're asking for the limiting case.
Oh, okay. A limiting principle.
Right?
Limiting principle.
It was a limiting principle? The limiting principle.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you think of did you listen to the oral arguments?
No.
Well, they were very exciting. Are you interested in what the arguments about Congress's limited enumerated powers are, and the idea that there's a judicially enforceable aspect of federalism, or do you think that's all a lot of conservative bull that we shouldn't have to be paying any attention to?
Well, I'm kind of I think if I understand the term legal realist correctly, I think I'm a legal realist. So I kind of think that a lot of...
If you want to use... Well, it doesn't matter what it really means. You want to use it as a term, so define it as you see it. You're a legal realist meaning...
I think it has two meanings. One is descriptive and one is prescriptive, maybe. I mean, the descriptive part would just be a kind of a cynical view of the way the courts work, right?
You want to be cynical about the courts.
I don't want to be. I think the accurate view of the way things work is that...
the judges are so political and so lying when they purport to base something in law that they shouldn't have the power that's grounded on law to say anything at all. It's all political, and therefore whatever is done by the political branches of government should be the final word, and judges should go into abject, supine restraint, and we don't need to hear from them anymore.
I think you can be a legal realist and say, nonetheless, the Supreme Court is on balance worth having.
What for what? Just to rubber stamp what the legislature
Just because when conflict arises over what the law means, you have to have somebody who can settle the matter.
And when you say the law, do you include the Constitution in addition to statutes?
Yeah, I guess. So this sounds like a trap, though, so maybe I should say no. This sounds like a trap.
I've been in this trapping business for over a quarter of a century, Bob.
And did I just walk into your trap?
I don't know. Welcome to my lovely trap. Do you want to hear the trap? I
want to hear the trap. I've sprung the trap. But I don't see the trap.
You think the judges ought to be... Well, that's what makes it such a good trap.
It's an excellent trap.
You have to think more about the trapology of all of this. Okay, if you think that the judges ought to be there to resolve conflicts in what the law is, Congress passes a statute. Presumably when Congress passes a statute, it does that with proper respect for its own duty to follow the Constitution. So presumably it has some idea of the Constitution, but it passes a statute. And then under Marbury versus Madison, we don't just go with Congress's packaged opinion. They must have thought it was constitutional because after all, they passed it.
I see what you're saying. So, you're saying you could let Congress be the arbiter of what's constitutional.
And that was what Marbury versus Madison was about, right? So, but the court said it's emphatically the province and duty of the Judicial Department to say what the law is. So, and the law includes the Constitution. And the Constitution is superior to the statutes. This is all really elementary, right? And so if the courts are saying what the law is, they say what the Constitution is, they say what the statute is, and if the statute conflicts with the Constitution, it's the judicial duty to say that the statute is unconstitutional. The Constitution must win. Now, those are very elementary propositions of law. Do you disagree with them because you're so cynical that you think that when the judges were to say that something is unconstitutional, what they're really just doing is redoing the work of the legislature, and it's not worth doing. And basically, version that the legislature gave us with, that here's a statute and it must be constitutional,
well,
that's what we should all just accept.
I actually hadn't thought until now about just, this may sound surprising that I hadn't, but about just saying, well, okay, Congress is the arbiter of what's legal and what's not. But let me ask you, even if you accepted that principle and said, look, by definition, laws that Congress passes are constitutional because they are the arbiters. Congress is the arbiter of what's constitutional. Wouldn't there still be categories of cases that wind up at the Supreme Court that could not be handled in that way?
What do you
like, say, Bush versus Gore, even. I mean, that was not like just a matter of letting a law sit. That was a question of how to proceed.
Bush v. Gore.
And by the way, wouldn't you call that vindication of legal realism? Don't you think that was badly decided by the conservative court?
No.
You don't?
No.
I thought many conservative jurists have said that that really was embarrassing.
Want to take a vote on it? I've taught the case Bush v. Gore many times.
You have? You think they were solid?
I think the problem in Bush v. Gore had to do not with a statute, but with something that a state court had done in ordering a statewide recount without setting a single standard that would answer a well-known question about how to count the ballots, so that it was relocalized into a judgment with different standards in different places about what counted as a vote. And the well-known question about how many corners of the Chad needed to be detached for it to count as a vote was not answered by the Florida Supreme Court when it ordered the recount, and that was a violation of voting rights under the Equal Protection Clause. You had to have one standard in the situation where there was a court at the top of the whole procedure that was in a position to resolve the well-known question. It didn't resolve it, and then that left it to be done differently in different places, and that connects up with a line of voting rights cases. And what was special about it was...
I'm not capable
I've taught it many times, Bob,
contesting
and I just
that.
think this is the whole thing about the fog of emotion. Everybody's supposed to just know Bush v. Gore was a cynical political exercise.
I just thought, I mean,
I'm reading the case and really understanding what was in it.
Here's my lodestar here, is if I remember correctly, Mickey Kaus said it was a shabby decision. He not only opined that himself, and Mickey went to law school, and his father was on the California Supreme Court and everything, and he pays attention to this stuff.
The argument from authority, okay. Well, I want to be an authority.
Well, yeah, look, when we're not experts and we don't have time to look into it, we all do this.
How many times has Mickey
but it isn't just authority. No, it's not authority in the sense that Mickey's a general and I'm a private. It's in the sense that over time, Mickey has struck me as somebody
listen to what you're saying. You're saying, listen to yourself. This is
How can I? You won't let me finish a sentence, Ann. How can I listen? Go ahead.
Well, this is my overarching theme. Instead of actually understanding the specifics of the legal arguments and the actual legal texts involved, you start talking about how everyone knows this, everyone thinks this, everyone's saying this.
I didn't say everyone knows, and I didn't say everyone thinks. You're putting those words in my mouth.
Okay.
The videotape exists, and I didn't say that.
But, Bob, you're saying authorities that seem authoritative to me, like Mickey Kaus, who has a father, like he inherited it from his father. His father was a judge, and Mickey Kaus went to law school.
No. Well, Ann, if you would let me finish my damn sentence, you'd know that you're on the wrong track, okay?
See, now you're the one.
I was about to say, if you'll excuse me, I was about to say, when you cut me off, Mickey has always struck me as intellectually honest, and if anything, he gets accused of bending over backwards to defend conservatives in this kind of contrarian way. But even Mickey Kaus said that was badly decided, and he also mentioned what?
Why did you start talking about Mickey Kaus when I was telling you the specific argument in the Supreme Court case? You didn't want to hear the details of the legal argument that I stated very clearly to you, Bob, as the record will show. What you did was immediately start talking about what other people think.
I don't have time to assess.
Just at least, this is what I've been pleading about from the beginning of this dialogue. Can't we be interested in the actual arguments and ideas? Why are we switching into emotion? Why are we talking about wanting to defer to other people's authority? Why can't we think? Why can't we understand the actual ideas?
We all do this.
Can we try not to? Could we
No,
it's
as a
just the way
practical
life
matter,
is.
and
It's all
as a
feeling.
practical matter, we can't. Do you want to know why? Do you want to know why you do it and I do it and everyone does it? Because there's only 24 hours in a day.
Right.
We cannot be experts on everything, and yet we have to live our lives in accordance with assumptions about various things we're not experts on.
I agree with that.
And we all do this, and you know it.
But can we at least then? I agree with that. That's certainly true. That's why I
Okay.
don't like to express opinions on, for example, foreign relations or economics. I don't have the expertise. I don't know.
And that's why I'm not going to opine on constitutional law.
But I stop at the point and acknowledge what I don't know. I don't shift over into saying my
That's
view.
what I did.
But
By
you-
saying I paid attention to
classic-
people I trust like Mickey, I was saying I'm not capable of making
All right,
an independent
but
judgment.
This is what I think people in politics do. They try to make people feel that they should adopt the view that they've been told by whoever it is they trust, by whoever it is who has their ear, has their heart, and then they internalize that opinion. The innocent boy was murdered. Rush Limbaugh demeaned a young woman. Whatever these ideas are, the Supreme Court is extremist. We choose the ones we want to adopt, and then we proceed and we vote based on that. I think we can do better. I think we should hold ourselves to a higher level of informing ourselves and thinking for ourselves.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but were all the examples you just cited examples of things liberals do?
What did I just cite? I'm having a
Trayvon Martin, the Rush Limbaugh.
No, well, let me put
why
some
do you think that those are the ones that come handiest to your mind?
Because they're on our list of things to talk about. But I brought up the
No, we didn't say we'd talk about the Rush Limbaugh case.
Oh, I put it on my last email, and then you didn't respond to my email, so it created a presumption on my part. So if you don't want to talk about Rush Limbaugh, leave the man out of this. But I did bring up Terry Schiavo. I said I thought it was like Terry Schiavo, so...
Okay, you get credit for that. Never mind. I take it back. You get credit for that. You're right.
I mean, I think the worst dictators in history have used that mode of manipulating the human mind, and I think that we have a moral duty to resist that and to get our minds clear and pay attention and look at what matters.
I think it's possible that what you're talking about is worse than it used to be. Maybe it's my imagination, but it does seem to me that there's a related thing that's happened, which is that more and more, rather than argue policy, it seems like we try to discredit the people on the other side of the argument, like personally discredit them.
We appeal to
like
authority
get you
of the
to
people
believe that
we
they're
like,
just bad.
And then we make the other people, they're just bad, they're just evil, we marginalize, we dehumanize them. Right? Isn't that, that's what racism and anti-Semitism, all the worst things that people do, happen in that mode. So we need to get out of that mode. That's what I would say. Why are we making other people toxic and dehumanizing them? Why can't we talk to each other?
Because it works. Because, if you're an interest group...
What do you mean it works to get power? It's all just a big power struggle. But I think
totally.
There are some of us who aren't about trying to get personal power, who are about actually trying to know the truth and to understand and to care about and to be moral individuals and to care about what matters and to see everyone as an individual human being and to try to gain some kind of harmony in the world. Isn't that important? Yeah. Aren't those kind of your issues too?
I'm in favor of that, but I don't pretend that I never get caught up emotionally in things and even probably resort to ad hominem attacks. But I try very hard to avoid it. And I actually think there's more of that around than there used to be.
Well, what do you think of the way, obviously, the major media used to have a stranglehold on everything. And this is how I think liberals got complacent, because they did own the mainstream media like the New York Times and the Washington Post. And these people could express themselves in this civil tone, and there wasn't all of this back and forth. But it was a monopoly, or a quasi-monopoly, in the marketplace of ideas. With the internet, we have all these other voices, and that's breaking down this stranglehold that this one group had. And I think this is creating kind of a panic, desperate situation for liberals who used to be able to get everyone to kind of knuckle under to the New York Times way good people think. So things are different now, and it seems more contentious, but I think it's a lot better, and I think it's more about trying to stabilize and balance and get to the truth and really engage with ideas, despite the nastiness of some of the speech, which I myself engage in.
Okay, so wait, in looking at the, much discussed lack of civil discourse, the nastiness
which, I've always
of contemporary discourse, you're saying liberals started it because they lost their monopoly on media?
I don't know who started it. This is like what was, were liberals stalking, were conservatives walking down a dark street and the liberals started following them in an SUV and suddenly, I don't know who started it.
Let me ask you this.
It's been going on since time began. It's from the beginning of language, I would say.
Let me ask you this. Fox News was, started, it seemed, as a kind of a counterpoint to CNN. Do you think CNN does as much of that in the liberal direction as Fox does in the conservative direction?
I think Fox News is written, it probably had a more sensationalistic tone, but you see why that happened. The group that was dominant, that everyone assumed was telling it straight and was neutral, CNN, the New York Times, and so forth, of course they developed this elite style of presenting themselves in this sober way. So however strong their ideas were, you didn't feel that they were strong. It's the upstarts that are going to sound like they're rocking the boat, that they're being more sensationalistic or whatever. That's kind of classism, That's sort of like, oh, let's have civility. Let's have the people who know how to speak in long sentences and use fancy words and never resort to slang and insults or whatever. Let's let them dominate the discourse. Well, there are different forms of speech, there are different ways of presenting ideas, and the people who started out dominant are in a really nice place for sounding like they're completely calm and sober and neutral. It's the people who are trying to rebalance things and bring in the different point of view who are going to sound nastier. So
you think the appeal to emotions, it was justified in the case of Fox News because they were the underdogs originally?
I'm not in favor of the appeal to emotions generally, but I think some of the discussion of ideas and different points of view is something that could contain ideas. See, that's what I think, that the liberals, especially like in this legal question about the Affordable Care Act, that liberals had a kind of ideology about it that involved not engaging with the actual legal arguments, even though they were saying something very sober and neutral sounding about the role of judges and deference to Congress and things like that. And then when the conservative side came in with specific legal arguments that they were stating, it was very disconcerting. Not because it involved insults or sensationalism or emotionalism or personal attacks. It actually involved more ideas. I mean, there are different ways that you can unsettle the sort of dominant, neutral view that's been taking center stage for so long. You could do it with sensationalism. You could do it with emotion. Come on over and watch our show because we have more blood and gore over here. We have people who yell at each other. That might happen. But it also might happen what happened with the conservative jurist, Paul Clement, arguing for the 26 states in the Supreme Court this past week, was the furthest thing from any kind of emotionalism or sensationalism. They were just crisp arguments for constitutional law, federalism, limited congressional powers, and he was stating them very clearly as ideas. And that was upsetting to the dominant discourse, which was about judicial restraint and deference to Congress.
So can I ask you about the technicalities of the case? Because I really haven't been paying much attention. So it sounds like there are a couple of questions. Like one is, there's no question that healthcare is interstate commerce, right? There isn't that question. The question is whether that justifies the kind of, unusual exercise of government power that would take the form of mandating that people buy insurance, right?
Obviously, the healthcare market and the health insurance market are huge interstate markets, and obviously under the Commerce Clause, Congress has the power to regulate that market, and it was trying to do that. The question is that in this regulation of the market that they were doing, how far could they reach beyond the actual participants in the market and start to regulate and impose requirements on people who weren't doing anything, were staying out of the market? Can they be swept into? It's very similar to the case about the Controlled Substance Act and medical marijuana, where you had some people that were getting included in the prohibition, which was done under the the Commerce Clause. People were getting swept into that who were just growing their own personal marijuana plant in their house to use and never to sell and to just use personally. How could those people be swept in? The Supreme Court in Wright said they could be swept in.
It said they could be swept in. So that would work on behalf of the of Obamacare in this case.
That's a very useful case for the government. Yeah.
And what about the argument that actually everyone winds up in the healthcare market, if not the healthcare insurance market?
Right.
So everyone is either a future participant or a present participant,
right.
And so the government is in effect regulating their participation.
Right. Yeah,
more than initiating.
That's very close to the argument that the SG was making. I think that the strongest argument, and I think that's a good argument, I think the strongest argument on the other side is that these people who are going, and of course, the hospitals have a legal obligation to treat people whether or not they can pay or not, and then a lot of people don't pay their bills, so then the costs have to be shifted, and that affects the whole market. There's a big dysfunctional market, and Congress is generally trying to correct that dysfunction. And I think it's clear that they should have the power to do that. It should be seen as having the power to do that under the Commerce power. The problem is that what they reached into went beyond that particular dysfunction. The dysfunction has to do with people showing up at emergency rooms, getting care, and then defaulting on their obligation to pay. If you wanted to correct that problem and identify the people who are future users of that service, first of all, some of those people actually would pay their own bills, so we're sweeping those people in too. But even more important, we're also, by the individual mandate doesn't say you have to have catastrophic health insurance to cover your costs if you should go to the emergency room and need emergency treatment, which we know they're going to have to give you whether you can pay for it or not. The comprehensive health insurance that people have to buy goes into all sorts of things, including things that you're never going to need, like men are required to buy insurance that would cover women getting maternity care. So all of this preventive care is included. Now it hasn't really been shown that people are, first of all, hospitals aren't required to give you all your preventive care. Right? So the dysfunction in the market has been expanded into something much huger.
I take your point on that. But this does, what you just said is that, okay, in this particular market, these people who are not yet participating, some of them, when they do participate, they will go into the emergency room, and the costs will wind up being borne by other participants in the market.
That's the core problem.
Shouldn't that be enough to at least address the limiting principle question? Broccoli isn't like that, right?
I'm not going to talk about broccoli right now.
Okay, no, but doesn't that fact exclude a lot of other kinds of cases?
Yeah, well, you need to state that as a limiting principle. What the SG kept doing was saying, we can do this. The request was, where's the line? Where do you get to the point of what you can't do? Don't say, because the SG is always going to come in and say, we can do this, and then when the judges say, all right, but since the first principle is that it's a government of limited enumerated powers, if you say you can do this, it has to, if we're gonna agree with that, we have to believe that there's something else that you can't do. So what's the limiting principle? And to just come back and say, well, we can do this because here's the reason why we can do this.
Yeah, no, he did a horrible job. Well,
I think people are scapegoating him. I think he's being set up.
No, but he did do a bad. And you just said that he was not being responsive to the limiting principle question.
Well, I think because he can't state a limiting principle that would include something as draconian as what Congress did, because you can't.
No, but the point we just agreed on, that the broccoli market does not have this cross-subsidy aspect
but Bob, you just admitted
participants.
Right, fine.
What?
But you just admitted it.
Admitted what?
The cross-subsidy, or whatever you call it. This idea that these future users of emergency care who are going to default on their bills after taking treatment that the hospitals are required to give them. If that were used as a basis for defining a market that would be regulated that would include them, then the law that would fit with that idea would be a law that would mandate that people get catastrophic insurance to cover precisely the things that people are going to be able to get for free. Whereas the kind of insurance people are being told they have to buy, you realize what it's covering all this preventive care. It's covering everything. It's a massive takeover of everything. So you're getting too much leverage out of this. Okay. There's a core idea that I think makes sense. But to say, given that core, we can bring all these other activities.
I understand the argument, but I'll bet there are all kinds of exercises of federal authority under the Interstate Commerce Clause that share that property of being, broader than the strictest application of the logic would
this is
justify,
question,
right? Isn't it pretty common, really? That you say, okay, this little aspect of this law is legitimately under interstate commerce.
So we'll just throw
we'll
throw everything else we want in. There's something that is 10% of our idea that is covered by interstate commerce. So we're going to sweep in the whole other 90%, because that's all stuff we want to do too. Can't we do it all?
And doesn't that happen?
Once I get started, once I get a foothold, I can do everything.
Right.
Well,
but doesn't that happen?
I think if you're going to make an argument like that, I don't think it would be very appealing to the judges who are going to have the majority.
My question is, doesn't this actually happen quite a bit? Aren't there laws whose validity is recognized that do exactly that, where it's only a relatively small part of their application that is strictly justified under the Commerce Clause?
I don't think so. And you see, doing strictly, there is the necessary and proper clause, which allows Congress to have a choice of means to achieve, the enumerated powers identify the great ends, like regulating commerce. And then in pursuit of that end, there's an idea that Congress has a choice of means. They're not restricted to only one means. So even though it says necessary and proper, you don't have to prove that this is the one thing that must be done. But there still is an idea that the means adopted have to be plainly adapted to the end, and not actually a pretext for doing other things. That's really
I'm sure there is that idea.
Well,
but I'll bet if I went through the laws that are in fact
to say,
justified
we've already
under
done it, it's water under the bridge. The Constitution has already been completely destroyed, so let's stop applying it. I don't think you can say that. I think the court, it's very hard to go back, as far as some people would want to go back. But the idea that we've come so far that we should just give up and say there are no limited enumerated powers. Congress can do anything it wants as long as it doesn't violate some affirmative limitation, like violate a right or something like that. That's the liberal position, basically. And in fact, that's what was taught in the law schools for many years prior to 1995. People just assumed the Commerce Clause. There are transcripts of judges even saying things that are like, the Commerce Clause, that's the clause that says Congress can do whatever it wants. And it was like a running joke in law schools. I mean, within the elite academy. That's what I was taught in law school when I studied constitutional law circa 1980. But the court stopped doing that in Lopez, the Gun-Free School Zones Act, in 1995. And the idea that, it's already over. It's a done deal. We don't really limit the commerce power. Look, I think that's where the liberal justices would go. I mean, I think if Obama gets reelected and Justice Scalia and Justice Thomas leave and they are replaced, I think that is what the law will become. I think that's what's at stake in the election. That is what the law will be. It won't be just what does Justice Kennedy think anymore. You won't have to depend on him because you will have a majority to go.
One last legal question: if this law had been written differently, so that what they're calling a financial penalty for defying the mandate was just called a tax. Or possibly you said everyone gets taxed and you get an exemption if you buy health insurance, whatever. If the incentive to buy health insurance were called a tax,
that was
wouldn't that make this a lot easier to defend?
If it could be portrayed as a tax, then Congress would be using the taxing power. There's an argument. What they would like to say is that you're not even really required. The individual mandate makes it look like you're required to buy insurance. That's not really what's going on. Right. All that is done is to identify who owes this tax. It's just a tax on people who don't have the insurance. And it's just a tax, and failure to buy insurance just puts you in the category of people who owe the tax. And that was the argument made. A problem with that was that Congress didn't call it a tax, even though they did refer to the taxing power numerous, and they never called it a tax, and they sold it to the public, and Obama and Harry Reid, and all these people said it's not a tax. Now they want to say it's a tax to get it within the taxing power, and maybe that's good enough that SG made that argument. It's not a tax, it is a tax, it's a tax when we need to be on. But here's the thing, Bob, this is really important, is look what's really going on with the individual mandate and that penalty. If you really look at it, the penalty is so low compared to what the cost of the insurance will be that the people who are currently not buying insurance aren't going to buy insurance. They're just going to pay the penalty, and then that money will go to the federal government. It raises revenue for the federal government. But what will happen to the insurance companies if they're bound by this requirement to issue insurance to people who have pre-existing conditions and to use community ratings so that they don't charge more to people who wait until they actually have a condition and then they want to buy the insurance? It'll have to be sold to it. It is going to it's going to ruin the insurance business if that's the way it goes. I think they're going to have to jack up the penalty over time in order to get more people to actually buy the insurance. It's really
I think they may well.
A total screw-up.
But let me be clear. You're saying that if they had used the language of taxation in the legislation, if they had just written it candidly as a tax,
they wouldn't have been.
Then they wouldn't be in this mess now.
Well, they would easily be able to call it the taxing power, but would they have been able to pass it? If they had forthrightly called it a tax, would they have been able to get the law passed? Because they were always saying, no new taxes, tax relief.
Right.
Look who they've imposed this tax on and this mandate on. It's young, healthy people who are in a big struggle right now in the current economy. We are saying to those people, we want you to spare, what is it, $5,000 of your scanty income in this whether you have a job or not, whatever your circumstances are, you need to fork over this amount for insurance. Enough insurance that will cover other people's maternity care and all these things that they need to do in their bariatric surgery or whatever. Meanwhile, you're a healthy person. You're struggling to get a foothold in the society. You have your education debts to pay off. Look at this, and you are really being used as a source of revenue. The idea is to get these young, healthy people into the pool that they've been staying out of so that there'll be more money to pay for everything else, or to get them to give more money via penalties to the federal government. It really is exploiting this group of people who is vulnerable, and it's not. A lot of these young people love Obama, and they were enthusiastic about health care. They're arguing for it, but it's going to be they're going to be caught quite abruptly when the bills come in and they see what they actually got in the money.
Okay. You got the last word on healthcare, and we're running out of time, but we wanted to talk about blogging a little, right?
Okay. Yeah, you've been blogging at The Atlantic. What do you think of it?
I'm not sure I've been blogging in the classic sense. I mean, I
yes,
think...
Yes, you're blogging, Bob.
But it's not really... What I do is see, what I think is there is some thinking among people, including some at The Atlantic, and including among me, I think maybe. There are people who say that the era of the blog, per se, is passing. In other words, while yes, in Althouse you have your following, they go to your blog every day and they check out and see what you've got, that's becoming a really rare thing for people to do at their computer. It's now hard for a blogger to acquire a following in the traditional sense, and for them to have a landing page that gets a lot of traffic. You know.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Is that your sense?
Atlantic is a great place to be.
Well, the Atlantic
is doing a great job, I think.
The Atlantic is a good place to be for precisely that reason, because it's getting enough traffic overall and gives you enough prominence.
What kind of traffic do you get on your blog? Do you know what your numbers are individually?
Yeah, I know what my numbers are. I probably average about 10,000 page views per post, which for somebody who has no following, that's not.
You don't think you have a following, Bob? What do you say?
I know I don't have a following.
Man. But you want to get
I certainly don't have a 10,000 person following.
It's a marketplace of ideas. My page views a day are, where am I? Page views a day are, like 50,000.
That's a lot. Of course, that's multiple items. I mean, I was saying I get about 10,000 per item. On the other hand, I'm often not posting more than one item per day. I mean, that's what I mean. I'm not doing blogging in the classic sense of pushing a lot of.
Well, I love the idea that there's a classic sense and that there was a golden age of blogging and that I was part of it. I feel quite, thrilled and cool about
well,
that.
You're still part of it. You're still part of it because you got in early enough to sustain that genre.
Right.
I think it's harder.
I thought I got in late. I really thought I got in late. It was too late to start back in '04 when I started. But
that's not that late.
It got
what is the secret
early.
of your success?
It got early,
okay.
late.
So if you did get in late, then all the more does the question arise: what is the secret to your success?
I would love for there to be more truly great blogs doing what I think real blogging is. I think if you're changing
the subject, aren't you? Didn't I ask you what the secret of your success is?
Oh, I didn't hear that. I'm sorry. Well, the secret of my success?
Yeah.
The secret of my success is that I just taking advantage of the particular package of things that I have that are true about me, and then very honestly going onto the page and putting it out there in a very real way that happens every day in real time relating to whatever the issues of the day are. And my particular package, one of it is that I'm as old as I am, and I've lived through a lot of eras. I have the ability to connect up ideas. I remember things. I can research things. And I also have legal training. I have a background in a particular kind of expertise that works really well applied to reading the newspaper. I have legal skills. I have an ability to do some things with words. And my experience and some abilities, and then just a real desire to actually hit the screen every day and put words out there. I really love, and I just really love to do it. And I'm willing to take risks and actually say what I really think. I'm not for any particular commercial enterprise like the Atlantic and the New York Times, whatever. I'm not for any particular political position. I'm always out there just trying to find out what I think and put it in writing and to think by writing and expose myself to people and let things happen on the page. And I find that very thrilling. I think that's the essence of blogging.
Don't you ever refrain from saying something you're feeling because you think, hey, that's just going too far. The blowback will be too bad.
I know how to say things. So, for example, I'm really used to being in the classroom where we talk about all kinds of delicate subjects, race and abortion and all kinds of subjects like that maybe people would get upset about, things that are politicized and things that people might get. And, of course, the students are always under pressure because they're trying to get their grade or they're worried about their career or this and that. And I'm trying to get a discussion going. And I just know how to phrase things so that I don't say things that I don't know. I'll put it in the form of a question, or I'll explore ideas, or I'll try to invite discussion on a point. So I think that I really know how to do that in a way that draws people in.
So you never pretend to know more than you do.
I don't pretend to know things that I really notice whether I'm saying things that I don't know. I have a provocative way of saying things that can inflame certain people, get them really mad at me. But if you look
I've
at
noticed
it,
that.
but I can always defend myself.
I've been one of them, in fact.
But I'm not in danger because I know what I'm doing. I know that I'm not saying things that I don't know. I know how to frame a sentence. And you might think, well, that's outrageous, or that's really, whatever.
Yeah, but don't you think
but I know what I'm doing. I really know what I'm doing with language with respect to that.
And you don't think you are kind of drawn to outrageous things? I mean, that's one of the allegations against you, as you know.
Oh, well, I like to write in an exciting, colorful way. I like to entertain people. I like to stimulate thought. But I don't say things that aren't true. I don't say things that I don't know.
But
and I really am about the search for truth, Bob. But also, I like ideas, and I like to play with ideas. I like to explore ideas. I like to get at who's lying, why people do different things, and I speculate about things like that. So I think it's really interesting. What I'm interested in more than anything else is, why do people think the way they do? How does the mind work? Why are people the way they are? Why do they have these ideas? So I'm interested in the ideas and the emotion around the ideas and the personalities around the ideas. To me, that's the most important. And so I don't have a political agenda. I'm not trying to get anybody elected. I can go everywhere and say things. You
know how I think your law training helps, and the fact that you're a law professor helps kind of in this context, is that part of the pedagogical technique in law class in particular is to throw out the outrageous example as a way of finding what we now all know is called the limiting principle, maybe. Right? I mean, don't you do that in class? Don't you say,
right,
well, couldn't you justify this?
Yeah, you say a hypothetical, and then the person might buy into that up to a point because they're trying to be a good person in this liberal environment where, you know,
right.
they don't want their peers to think they're bad. But then you explore that and you come into it with other principles. And if that were the rule, then what would happen in this other situation?
Right.
And
but doesn't some of your blog provocation come from that style?
Yeah. I have a sort of a law professor to the world. And some of what I do here in Madison, like when I would go down to the protests, I felt like I was a roving law professor and I would encounter people. I wouldn't say I'm a law professor, let me pin you down on this. I would invite people would talk to me, I would interact with them, and they probably didn't, at least now they all know who I am, but when they didn't know I was a law professor, I would explore ideas with them. And I knew what I was doing. I would let them say things. And then I would follow up with questions. So,
but
and I don't do it just because I'm trying to hurt them or trap them. I want people to think. I really want people to pay attention to ideas, think better, and become fuller human beings who really participate in the world of ideas and democratic decision making. Seriously.
Okay. Well, I'm in favor of that.
So, but tell me about what your situation with blogging is.
No, I think we should save your interview of me for the next time. We've already been doing this an hour and 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, sorry.
But look, I'll give you more time. We can devote, how about we devote 6 to 7 1-hour dialogues to just you interviewing me. We'll call it the Bob series. How's that?
Okay, sure.
I was kidding. But I mean, I don't think I don't have the hang of blogging is the short answer to your question.
Well, you know, take more, write more frequent short posts.
Yeah, we could get into
why this is not... And reveal more of what you're actually thinking, speculate more, and open up what you're thinking. Don't try to push an actual position, but show your work more, show your thoughts more, and be more of a person who seems to be, you know, alive on the web, like living on the page, I would say. Living on the page.
I think that's good advice if we were in the golden age
of
blog.
You know, that was my original motto, was to live freely in writing.
Well, I do think, I think thick skin helps. If you're going to live out loud, you know, you have to develop a healthy indifference to what people say about you, right?
And this goes back to my point about liberals. They want other people to like them. And that's a trap. And that's a...
Wait, who does liberals do?
Liberals want other people
Conservatives
to like
don't want to be liked? Well, they're doing a good job.
Right. See, that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
But we should... So, if you want to walk out into the wider world among conservatives, you do need the thick skin. You have to be willing to not be liked.
We're over an hour, but we got to go. There's things we didn't have a chance to talk about. We were going to talk about why your commenters hate me.
Yeah.
But...
And I was going to talk about how I went to see Ron Paul here on campus last night.
You blogged about that.
Yeah.
There are things about him that would appeal to you, I'm sure, but we shouldn't get into that.
Right, because
we should save it for next time, which should be soon, I think.
Okay.
Because, you know, you get me screaming in a way that so few people do these days.
You set out as your plan to get me mad, but I got you mad, so...
See, that's the other thing you're always doing is attributing motives to people. I didn't set out to get you mad.
Oh, well, let the record show. Well, we have a recording of this, so people can go back to the beginning and see what you said.
Of me saying I wanted to get you... Did I say that? Okay, then I take it back. It's not true.
You were trying to get another one like the famous, whatever.
Whatever. Okay, so let's do this. Let's ask your commenters whether they want us to do this again. And if most of them say no, fine. Let them have their way.
They'll say, why are you talking to that horrible man?
They will. They will. They will. And they'll do it, and many of them will do it in this kind of junior high-ish, very ad hominem, not very cerebral way, I predict.
Well, I'll kick their ass in the comments for you, okay, Bob?
They'll use phrases like that. Yeah. So now I see where that comes from. Okay. Well, thank you, Anne.
Okay, thank you.
This was great.
Great talking to you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.